So far, the number of people who have died of monkeypox globally, 5. 5 people have died globally.
You know, like, not everybody died from COVID. It may have been the case that 1 million people have died in the United States and 6.5 rounding up have died around the world to COVID, but even the people who have not died suffer a variety of symptoms like long COVID, which we don't even fully understand the actual full ramifications of, where they've gotten COVID, miraculously, thank God they didn't fucking die, and now they can't walk up the stairs without getting winded when previously they were running marathons. Like, that's real. There's an actual marathon runner, as far as I'm aware, who literally can't do that anymore, who could barely walk upstairs because they got COVID and now they got long COVID. So it's almost like dying is not the only consequence that I feel like should make you take the disease seriously. But anyway, I don't know, man. Like, do you just want people to suffer? That seems to be what it is. So honestly, I've been wondering, you know, what have they been lying to me about? What have they been lying to all of us about, really? What do they love lying to us about? So now we have Ben Shapiro. You know, whenever I got a question, I know I could find an answer with Ben Shapiro, so now we've come here to figure it out. Apparently, they love lying to you, and I don't know who they is. We imagine this is the World Health Organization or something like that. I don't actually know what their logo looks like. And we got a person which seems like they have bumps and they're scratching. So you'd imagine this is about monkeypox. So let's see what's up. Let's see what brilliant takes Ben Shapiro has for us.
Everybody is talking about monkeypox, apparently.
Is everybody, though? I feel like not a lot of people are actually talking about it. In fact, I feel like people probably aren't talking about it as much as they should, and the ways that they are talking about it has not been very good. So a big problem that I have had with a lot of what I've seen about the monkeypox stuff is that for some reason, even some like official sources, I feel like, decided to really focus in on monkeypox, one of its potential vectors for spreading being intimate contact, specifically sexual contact, because, you know, it's about as intimate as you can get. And for some reason, it turned into being some kind of so-called quote-unquote gay disease. I don't actually know for sure. I don't remember fully, but I feel like in the beginning, there was actually some official sources that were talking about it like it was transmitted through homosexual sex, specifically with gay men. And I've always been bothered by this because that wasn't all of it. But obviously, the right wing decided to hone in on that 100% and go whole hog on it, calling it a gay disease, lying to you that it's an STI when it isn't. It is not a sexually transmitted infection. Obviously, you can contract it during sex, but you could also contract COVID during sex because it is aerosolized in the air, COVID is, and you can get it if you're bumping and grinding with somebody and you're breathing on each other. Well, there you got COVID now. If the other person had it, is that sexually transmitted? No, you fucking idiot. You stupid, silly little goose. And monkeypox is the same way. You can actually get it by touching fabrics that another person who has had it was wearing or touching. I don't think that makes it sexually transmitted, frankly. But of course, because the right wing has been ramping up their groomer rhetoric, they've been very busy completely destroying the definition of a very serious accusation of grooming, which has led to a variety of anti-child abuse organizations asking people to shut the fuck up about it, specifically the right wing, because it's actually making their job harder. The job that they try to do to prevent children from being abused, it's actually making their job harder. So the big problem with the monkeypox thing is obviously that the right wing is going to weaponize it to try to continue to oppress queer people, because it was really, really, really irresponsibly messaged as being a so-called gay disease and being a sexually transmitted infection, which it isn't. One, more people are going to get it because they think they might be safe if they're not a gay man. And two, the right is currently trying to criminalize being trans and queer in this country. Some of the steps to that being the bathroom bills that we're seeing, the trans women in sports bills we're seeing, like what Florida is trying to do, get trans-affirming care off of Medicaid, literally trying to criminalize cross-dressing, quote-unquote, as well, essentially making it a crime to be trans in public. One of the steps to doing that, and one of the ways that you can, if you effectively message it anyway, in order to criminalize being queer, generally speaking, would be to tie it to some kind of a disease. If you look at the steps toward genocide, one of those is comparing the otherized group to diseases or to vermin, to pests. And the disease one is very clear. They call being trans, you know, a social contagion, which is literally just calling it a disease, just a social one, which, by the way, the social contagion contagion shit, which Ben Shapiro does push, has been completely debunked. It is a completely bunk theory. And, you know, it's just, it is what it is. I mean, if you understand history, if you understand the ways that fascists in the past have been able to get the broader population who aren't out and about fascists, but might have some sympathies or be more willing to be motivated by fear to go along to get along with the fascists, so long as they're not part of the groups being targeted, you start to see a lot of similarities when it comes to queer people, specifically trans people. And the monkeypox thing is just another piece of that puzzle, which is why the right wing is very excited to talk about it. So I imagine that not only was the official messaging on monkeypox in the beginning very irresponsible and bad, but of course it was probably completely puffed up by the right wing in order to facilitate this kind of essentially attributing queer people to diseases that need to be eradicated, right? Which is the way that these people have always looked at queer people. It's just that they've had to tolerate them for some amount of time. They've been biding their time until now they have an activist Supreme Court, which is willing to do their bidding. So I don't know. I'm super curious. And obviously we got Marjorie Taylor Greene being like, oh my God, if it's a gay disease, if it is an STI, how are our children getting it? It's because it's not, you stupid fuck. But we'll get into that.
The WHO has now declared an international global emergency over monkeypox. By the way, this is super scientific stuff. When I say super scientific, I mean that apparently the head of the World Health Organization overruled a divided expert panel to issue the group's highest alert in order to do this. Okay, so that right there tells you that this is not actually a scientific question. It is a political...
Wait, how? I'm sorry, what?
Apparently, the head of the World Health Organization overruled a divided expert panel to issue the group's highest alert in order to do this. Okay, so...
I would have to see the source on that. Head of WHO overrule. Ah, there it is. Well, this is Swiss info. What the fuck is that? Look at Reuters. From Reuters.com, you know, liberal communist Reuters.com. WHO's Tedros acted as tiebreaker to break disagreement over monkeypox designation. July 23rd. World Health Organization Tedros Adhanom. Holy! How am I meant to pronounce this name, man? What a test. Ghebreyesus. That's fair enough. Ghebreyesus said on Saturday he had to act as a tiebreaker to resolve a disagreement on whether to declare the monkeypox outbreak a global health emergency. A tiebreaker, meaning that the expert panel was not overruled. They were literally in a deadlock, in a tie, where they had one part of the group not wanting to go through with this designation and the other part of the group wanting to go through with it. So the head of the organization, acting as a tiebreaker, has decided to go forward with a designation. I don't know that you would call that overruling so much as there were an equal number of people on either side, so then a tiebreaker had to be determined. It's almost like how the vice president of the United States works when it comes to being tiebreaker votes on a variety of things when it comes to deadlock in the Congress, which Republicans are a pretty big fan of whenever they're in power. 9 members of the expert committee were against the designation, with 6 in favor. That was told reporters after the WHO gave the virus the highest level of alert. So it's not even, but we still got a tiebreaker. Quote, although I am declaring a public health emergency of international concern, for the moment this is an outbreak that is concentrated among men who have sex with men, especially those with multiple sexual partners, Tedros said. Is this actually true? I hate this messaging. It's so bad. Like, I understand wanting to be like talking about like, oh, well, there are specific high-risk groups that this disease seems to be impacting. But I feel like anytime you bring that up, you necessarily have to talk about how it is not just these demographics that are at risk. They're just the highest at risk. And that anybody else could get it. It's not a sexually transmitted disease. You can get it literally just by touching the fabric of another person who has monkeypox, who touched that fabric. Like, I feel like it's very irresponsible, man. Also, what exactly entails public health emergency of international concern? Oh, wait, we have her here. What is this absolutely ludicrous ruling? A public health emergency of international concern is a formal declaration by the World Health Organization of, quote, an extraordinary event which is determined to constitute a public health risk to other states through the international spread of disease and to potentially require a coordinated international response, formulated when a situation arises that is, quote, serious, sudden, unusual, or unexpected, which, quote, carries implications for public health beyond the affected state's national border, and, quote, may require immediate international action. I feel like this falls under the definition. If we're seeing the rises in cases at an international level in a variety of states, it doesn't seem like an overreaction to me. And you can argue that because of the absolute devastation that we've seen by a variety of states, the United States included, not taking COVID seriously, well, maybe we want to act with an abundance of caution about another disease so we don't have simultaneous pandemics of equal severity. Like, we kind of maybe want to learn from our mistakes when it comes to the first pandemic of the modern age and not have a second one that's just as bad. Maybe do enough to make it not as bad. Maybe. Just a wild thought. So, like, the fact that the 9-6 panel was tie-broken, apparently, by the head of the World Health Organization to institute this declaration, this isn't even like a binding declaration. This isn't a policy proposal. This is literally just being like, yo, shit could get crazy. We're seeing cases crop up everywhere. We're going to want to take this seriously because we've already got COVID going on, and we probably don't want two pandemics brewing at the same time. Probably not a good play. This is like poking people with a stick, being like, hey, do something maybe. Maybe try to do something to stop this from being such a bad thing. Maybe if we actually take this one seriously, we might not be suffering as much like we did from the last one, which is still ongoing. The WHO has not unilaterally been like, okay, so now everybody has to lock the fuck down. Everybody has to stay indoors. We're going to weld your doors shut. You know, that fun conspiracy theory that they had about COVID, which didn't turn out to be true. So what's so bad about this?
Ruled a divided expert panel to issue the group's highest alert in order to do this. Okay, so that right there tells you that this is not actually a scientific question. It is a political question because, again...
So because there was disagreements on either side of the panel about this designation, this non-binding designation, as far as I'm aware, suddenly because there was a tiebreaker and the head of the WHO decided to go with an abundance of caution and make this declaration, suddenly just all political. Political for fucking what? What political gain is there to be had? I've not yet seen a single shred of evidence that there is anything politically to be gained from, like, any of this shit. Like, in fact, what there is to be gained politically is making it so that if you take the disease seriously, less people suffer and die from it, like with COVID. So let's see how we substantiate
the WHO
this.
was like not a global health emergency, and because the panel of the WHO was like not a global health emergency.
It was 9-6 or 6-9, I guess, in favor. It's not like there was a single person. Everybody else was like, no, it's not a big deal. But the head of the WHO was like, fuck you, actually, it is a big deal. It's not what happened. But obviously, the only way we could talk about these things is by misrepresenting them. Because actual objective reality that you can see with your own eyes and ears is not to be believed. If you are a conservative, or if you are a Republican, if you are a right-winger, the only way you can actually remain comfortable in our world is by pretending that certain things don't exist that obviously and measurably do. And essentially just plug your ears, go na-na-na boo-boo, I don't hear it, I don't see it, you know, cover your eyes, and just don't pay attention to it, and surely it'll go away.
And because it's gotten so much media attention, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the WHO...
Oh, shit, that's good. Listen, I appreciate, this is one credit I'll give to Ben Shapiro. It's like when he says, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's like when he does that with her name, because he's been practicing his Spanish accent in order to try to woo her if they ever get to talk one day.
The attention. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the WHO...
It could use some work, okay? Mine wasn't that great either, but, you know, I give him props for the effort. I appreciate that. That's one piece of credit I'll give him.
Director General overruled that panel. He said that this was instead a public health emergency of international concern, a designation the WHO currently uses to describe two other diseases, COVID-19 and polio. Well,
okay. Well, it seems like for the one that's killed 1 million people, is it 1 million? Has it gone up? USA COVID-19 death toll. Let's find out. 1.03 million. You know, for a disease that's killed 1.03 million people in the United States alone, 6.4 million the world over, I think that is a fair designation to make about it. And when it comes to polio, I've not, unfortunately, looked into that one too much, but, you know.
Well, you may have noticed that COVID-19 hit, like, pretty much everybody on Earth, and polio is widely transmissible outside of people having sex with each other.
Sure.
Okay, this particular disease, as we'll discuss in just 1 second, seems to be transmitted almost entirely by men having sex with men.
So that's not actually true, by the way. Which is why I say that the rhetoric around some of the higher risk groups being men having sex with men, and the focus on that, while, it is important, like I said, to make note of the higher risk groups, you need to simultaneously couple that messaging with, but it can affect anybody, and it's not just sexually transmitted.
Dr. Tedros said, "We have an outbreak that has spread around the world rapidly through new modes of transmission, about which we understand too little, and which meets the criteria for a public health emergency." Well, we actually do understand the mode of transmission. It's
we don't know.
Via penis. It was apparently the first.
So it's not, you stupid fuck. God, this guy is a fucking idiot. Monkeypox CDC. Let's see what's up. All right, from the communist CDC. That's what one of those C's stands for, surely. About monkeypox. Let's go. Are you ready? Surely the CDC has some level of knowledge around how this virus works, how this disease works. Quote, monkeypox is a rare disease caused by infection with the monkeypox virus. Monkeypox virus is part of the same family of viruses as variola virus, virus that causes smallpox. Monkeypox symptoms are similar to smallpox symptoms, but milder, and monkeypox is rarely fatal. Well, that's good. Monkeypox is not related to chickenpox. How it spreads. Let's go. So this is the major claim being made by Ben Shapiro there. It seems to be that the primary mode of the virus is through the penis. Monkeypox spreads in a few ways. 1. Monkeypox can be spread to anyone through close, personal, often skin-to-skin contact, including direct contact with a monkeypox rash, scabs, or body fluids from a person with monkeypox. Well, you don't really need to be having sex to do that. Touching objects, fabrics, clothing, bedding, or towels, and surfaces that have been used by someone with monkeypox. Well, once again, you don't have to be having sex for that one. Contact with respiratory secretions. Well, you don't really have to be having sex with that one. This direct contact can happen during intimate contact, including oral, anal, and vaginal sex, or touching the genitals, penis, testicles, labia, and vagina, or anus, butthole. Thank you for that one, CDC. I wasn't exactly sure what the anus was. Of a person with monkeypox. Well, you're kind of having to have sex for this one, but there are 3 of these here that you don't. I wonder if this is actually sexually transmitted or not. Hugging, massage, and kissing. Well, that's not sex unless you're a conservative. And you think that even hugging your sister, let's say, I don't know, conservatives got kind of some weird ideas about incest, but, carry on. Prolonged face-to-face contact. Well, you don't really have to be having sex with that one. Touching fabrics and objects during sex that were used by a person with monkeypox that have not been disinfected, such as bedding, towels, fetish gear, and sex toys. Glad we're being very specific. A pregnant person can spread the virus to their fetus through the placenta. What the fuck is a pregnant person? God damn it. That's a woman. Women are not people. You can't say pregnant person. They're not people, brother. They are goddamn wombs to pump out new, God-fearing, blue-eyed, blonde-haired men. I know that's right. What the fuck is a pregnant person? A person with monkeypox can spread it to others from the time symptoms start until the rash is fully healed and a fresh layer of skin is formed. The illness typically lasts 2 to 4 weeks. Prevention. Prevent the spread of monkeypox. Let's see. Community settings. Well, are we having public orgies? Human-to-human transmission of monkeypox virus occurs by direct contact with lesions, infected bodily fluids, or from exposure to respiratory secretions during prolonged face-to-face contact. So you could be hugging your mother, and if she has monkeypox, and you're hugging her because you're both crying over maybe a family member has been claimed by COVID, unfortunately, one of the pandemics we have going on, and now, unfortunately, your mom has monkeypox as well, and if you're hugging her for any amount of time trying to console her, well, now you might have monkeypox as well. I don't think you're fucking her. Ideally, you're not. You get what I'm saying. I feel like I've gone over this enough. Vaccines. Let's look at this one really quick. CDC recommends vaccination for people who have been exposed to monkeypox and people who may be more likely to get monkeypox. People who are more likely to get monkeypox include people who have been identified by public health officials as a contact of someone with monkeypox, people who are aware that one of their sexual partners in the past 2 weeks has been diagnosed with monkeypox, people who had multiple sexual partners in the past 2 weeks in an area with known monkeypox, which is interesting because a lot of the things that they talked about that you could get literally at any time not having sex with somebody, touching the fabrics or skin of another person, prolonged, exposure to respiratory secretions, by face-to-face contact, you don't have to be having sex to do that. Obviously, when you're having sex, those things are incredibly more likely to be occurring, right? But that's not to say that it's an STI because it's not. And to say that it is not only 1, misinformation, 2, completely irresponsible and will lead to more people getting it because they think they might be immune to it because they're not gay men. If a straight man gets monkeypox, is he gay now? I wonder. Perhaps. So, Ben Shapiro is literally just lying to you. Ben Shapiro doesn't want you to understand the information that is readily available for your eyes to read. He essentially wants you to not believe your eyes and ears, and it seems to be one of his final most important commands.
The WHO's declaration signals a public health risk requiring a coordinated international response. The designation can lead to member countries to invest significant resources in controlling an outbreak, draw more funding to the response, and encourage nations to share vaccines, treatments, and other key resources for
This seems pretty good to me, man. If we make it so that monkeypox actually isn't a big deal through all of that, well, that sounds kind of cool. I don't know why you would be particularly opposed, to be honest with you.
containing the outbreak. Now, of course, there is a vaccine for monkeypox, but the FDA in the United States totally held up the development of enough vaccine until it was too late. Like, they are just now
cringe.
getting through the process of approving the vaccine that should have been available for monkeypox because they had a vaccine.
True.
They basically allowed it to expire. All
I will
vaccine
agree with
got
this.
really old and therefore ineffective. And then the FDA didn't re-up on that. So well done once again, administrative state.
Wait, does anybody know? I don't know if anybody does. I wonder what the state of the FDA is currently after 4 years of Donald Trump. Because I would imagine that if Donald Trump and the Republicans in his administration had anything to do with it, they probably weren't too kind to the FDA. The story, which is as old as time itself, is that Republicans will tell you that government doesn't work. And then when they get elected, when they gain power, they completely torpedo all of these government programs to make sure that they don't work. Even though if they were actually adequately funded and staffed, they can be proven to be effective in other states around the world who have similar kinds of federal programs. But, you know, that kind of information's a bit inconvenient to the narrative.
This is the 7th public health emergency since 2007. COVID-19 was the most recent. Some global health experts have criticized the WHO's criteria for declaring such emergencies as opaque and inconsistent. Yeah, you would think. I mean, again,
I will say, like, the messaging has been pretty fucked. I will agree with that.
Is not exactly on the level of COVID-19. So far, the number of people who have died of monkeypox globally, 5. 5 people have died globally.
You know, like, not everybody died from COVID. It may have been the case that 1 million people have died in the United States and 6.5 rounding up, because we'll get there eventually, have died around the world to COVID. But even the people who have not died suffer a variety of symptoms like long COVID, which we don't even fully understand the actual full ramifications of. Where they've gotten COVID, miraculously, thank God they didn't fucking die, and now they can't walk up the stairs without getting winded when previously they were running marathons. This is like, that's real. There's an actual marathon runner, as far as I'm aware, who literally can't do that anymore, who could barely walk upstairs because they got COVID and now they got long COVID. So it's almost like dying is not the only consequence that I feel like should make you take the disease seriously. Like, for instance, if you were to get infected with a disease and it made your left leg inoperable, but you didn't die, well, at least you didn't die, but your left leg is still inoperable, and it is kind of nice to have both of those. But anyway, I don't know, man. Like, do you just want people to suffer? That seems to be what it is.
Monkeypox, which does not sound like a global health emergency to me. That sounds like a bad weekend in Chicago.
Yeah, except that you would have to wonder, like, what are the long-term ramifications of this? And even if it's not, like, super severe, would it not be a good idea to make sure less people get it anyway? This is weird as fuck, man. It's almost like he's pro-monkeypox. This is what it feels like. Like, ooh, the organization, the WHO, which is tasked with the difficult job of trying to direct responses to world health concerns, is putting out a declaration, trying to make it so that people take seriously a disease so that less people get it. And he's like, well, that's fucking cringe, man. We should just allow as many people to get it as possible. Fuck it. YOLO. What the fuck's the point of making it so that people don't suffer? Why? Where's the profit motive in that? Which, you know, ironically, if people have to take, 2 to 4 weeks off of work because they got monkeypox, well, then that's going to hurt the business. And it's also going to hurt them if they're not paid, if they don't have sick leave, which in the United States, you're lucky if you have. So there is actually an economic impact should enough people get it, which we saw from COVID. The economy grinded to a halt and plummeted to the center of the earth. Like, I don't know, man. He's pro monkeypox. Just the same way that Republicans, in their inaction, and even their action in terms of their rhetoric about, oh, you should be able to get together, don't wear masks, yada yada, that all these Republicans saying this. It's like they were pro-COVID. They're also now pro-monkeypox. Anytime there is a new disease, their little NPC brain, they take out the COVID-19 chip and they put the monkeypox chip in, and they're like, no, now we got to be on the side of monkeypox. It has to spread as far as possible because I'm a Republican and I hate people and myself, generally speaking. Like, it's so weird.
Pox has been a concern for years, according to the New York Times. In some African countries, in recent weeks, the virus has spread worldwide. Some 75 countries have reported at least 16,000 cases so far. Nearly all the infections outside Africa have occurred among men who have sex with men. This isn't me just saying this. This is the New York Times saying this. The outbreak has galvanized many in the LGBT...
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's just with that group. You can talk about higher risk demographics, but that's not the only demographic.
Community who have charged that monkeypox has not received the attention it deserves, as happened in the early days of the HIV epidemic. Well, I mean, I feel like it's getting a bleep load of attention. Don't you? I mean,
I'm glad he censored there. You know, if you watch this channel, you're not a big fan of naughty words, you know, filthy language. So luckily for all of you.
And also, it seems as though the media are really going out of their way to pretend that this thing could affect pretty much anybody on Earth.
Well, the actual transmissibility of it, what we understand of it, quite literally could affect anybody on Earth, especially those who are not inoculated against smallpox, let's say, in the past. Like, that's quite literally the demonstrable facts. That's objective reality, that you can get it literally just by touching the fabric of another person who's touched it, who had monkeypox. You can get it that way. Like, obviously, if it is the case that you can get it simply by somebody goes to a clothing store, they try on a shirt, they had monkeypox, they didn't know, and then you go into that clothing store, they didn't buy it, you try on that shirt before it has a chance to have been cleaned, and now you got monkeypox. Well, I don't think you fucked that person, and now you have monkeypox. So it seems like it could actually affect everybody, because the way that it transmits from person to person is not relegated to one specific demographic, even if that demographic is overrepresented in the cases.
In the early days of HIV, that was not the case. So when it came to HIV, the early days of HIV, the media basically suggested correctly that it was between homosexual men.
How can you be, in 2022, saying that the messaging on HIV and AIDS being between homosexual men almost exclusively, which was the idea at the time, that it was just a gay disease? Shouts out Ronald Reagan, rest in piss, you won't be missed, who records have shown completely ignored the HIV and AIDS epidemic because he thought it would kill a bunch of gay people. Turns out that it's not just relegated to gay people. Turns out monkeypox isn't either. But you would imagine Ben Shapiro was a big fan of that decision by the Reagan administration, so.
That HIV was being transmitted, which was largely true. Then
largely true. Oh, largely true. That largely is really pulling a lot of weight.
Media push to the other side. Anyone could get HIV at any time. Men having sex with women, women having sex with women. This sexually transmitted disease was going to be widely spread throughout human society. And it turns out that, statistically speaking, that was not true. Well, now with monkeypox, they're just starting from step 2. They're just going.
So is HIV transmitted through respiratory secretions? Can you get HIV by wearing a shirt that another person tried on in a store? Can you get HIV then that way? Is that actually true? How does HIV spread? Oh, we don't want to look at communist CDC. Look at Wikipedia. You know, anybody can, may get it here. So, surely the conservatives could have a part to play. Transmission. HIV is spread through 3 main routes: sexual contact, significant exposure to infected bodily fluids or tissues, and from mother to child during pregnancy, delivery, or breastfeeding. There is no risk of acquiring HIV if exposed to feces, nasal secretions, saliva, sputum, sweat, tears, urine, or vomit, unless these are contaminated with blood. It is also possible to be co-infected by more than one strain of HIV, a condition known as HIV superinfection. Jesus. So obviously the main one is sexual here. Bodily fluids seem to go hand in hand with that, but that's not just it, right? Mother to child. But if we go back to the monkeypox transmissibility and how it spreads, oh, would you look at that? Direct contact with the monkeypox rash, scabs, or bodily fluids. Touching objects, fabrics, and surfaces that have been used by someone with monkeypox. Unless that person is bleeding on those surfaces and then you touch it, you're not likely to get HIV. But if somebody has monkeypox and they've touched these objects, well, it turns out you're likely to get it, which is why we're dealing with a different animal here. So, like, trying to make comparisons to HIV is one of the worst arguments you could possibly make, in the way that he's doing anyway. Which is why a variety of people have been like, yo, if you look back at HIV, not in how it spread, but rather the government messaging and the public's perception of HIV and how it spread. Well, if we do the same thing now, which we seem to be doing, it's not going to end well, because look at HIV AIDS, it hasn't ended well either. That's the comparison you can make that's actually accurate, because we're not talking about the actual transmissibility of the virus, we're talking about the messaging around it and the public's knowledge of it. Those are different things.
Right to anybody can get monkeypox at any time, even though we now know that virtually everyone who is getting monkeypox is a man having sex with another man. The WHO's declaration is better late than never, said Dr. Baghuma Titanji, an infectious diseases physician at Emory University.
I love how much stank he puts on that. Whenever he reads a name that doesn't sound like they think mayo is spicy, It's like, ooh, we gotta make sure we play that one up. And like when he quotes their credentials, like, ooh, infectious diseases physician. He's so sassy. He's just a sassy little bitch.
Atlanta, but with the delay, one can argue that the response globally has continued to suffer from lack of coordination. Apparently, the outbreak is expected to infect maybe hundreds of thousands of people, depending on who exactly engages in this sort of behavior, and may have permanently
what sort of behavior are we talking about?
entrenched itself in some countries, according to Dr. James Lawler, co-director of the University of Nebraska's Global Center for Health Security. We'll get to more on this in just...
Yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry. Holy fuck, how long is this? That's like a 2-minute ad. Jesus. Yo, you should be happy I don't give you ads like that. God damn.
Now, the real question about this is whether it is actually a virus that is widely transmissible in any serious way outside of men having sex with men, or whether it's just a new kind of STD.
So it's literally not just a new kind of STD, which I feel like I've debunked ad nauseum at this point.
The World Health Organization, after declaring the outbreak a global health emergency, there are serious questions among doctors about why exactly this is not an STD. Dr. Roy Zucker, director of the Tel Aviv Sorovsky Medical Center, Ichilov Hospital's LGBTQ health services, and a doctor at CALLOUT Health Services, said whether or not monkeypox could be designated as an STD is a quote-unquote great question. He said, we know from past data the virus can be spread by being in the presence of someone who's infected for a long time, say for 3 hours at a distance of 2 meters or so, or by simply coming into physical contact with them. But what we're seeing across the world and in Israel is that most of the patients were infected via sexual activity. The WHO...
Yeah, because the preconditions for the transmissibility of monkeypox, while they can occur outside of sexual intimacy, they also occur during sexual intimacy. Which is to say that you might be at higher risk if you're having sex with multiple partners, let's say, and you should be more careful if you don't want to get monkeypox or spread it. But that's not to say that it's relegated to those activities. This is very standard logic, very standard logical thinking. I feel like I'm engaging with here. Like, I'm a fucking dipshit bimbo on the internet and I can understand this shit. What the fuck are we talking about here, Ben Shapiro?
Also said the same. So it appears as though this disease is transmitted sexually, and so we can begin to refer to it as another STD. But of course, everyone is afraid of calling it an STD.
Well, yeah, why the fuck would you call it an STD if it's not exclusively that? I guess the counter argument to what I've just said is like, oh, well, HIV, like if somebody bleeds on you, well, then you can get it, right? Or if you're in contact with something where their blood is contaminated, like they've vomited on you or whatever. Well, yeah, sure, it's not exclusively an STD because the transmissibility of it outside of sexual contact is incredibly difficult. But it seems like that the transmissibility, like we've said time and again in this video, for monkeypox is at a higher risk outside of sexual contact for monkeypox than it is for HIV. So I don't know why you would need to designate it as a sexually transmitted disease or as an STI. You could just say that people who are engaging in sexual intimacy are at a higher risk than other demographics might be.
STD, because then, of course, they're afraid of the stigma that might attach to homosexual sex, which there must never...
Well, I think we're actually afraid of the idea that people who aren't gay men might think that they're okay and they're not at risk, and then they end up getting it because they're fucking idiots who are probably watching Ben Shapiro's program and have been misinformed about a disease that could easily be prevented.
Be any stigmas with regard to any sexual activity, let alone homosexual sex, no matter the levels of transmission of STDs, which differ widely based on the kind of sex that people are having and with whom they are having that sex. If you don't have sex with strange men in high promiscuity areas, the chances of you getting monkeypox are significantly lower than if you do.
Significantly lower. So now at least we've got a little bit, the walls of his delusion have been broken down a little bit. We've kind of crawled out of a tiny little crack in his warped version of reality. And he's now said that, oh, well, the chances of you getting monkeypox are significantly lower than if you're having sex with multiple partners, for instance. But that doesn't mean that it's relegated to people who are having gay sex. It doesn't mean that you can say that it's just, transmitted through a penis. Even if that's a joke, I don't think that you should necessarily be joking about the transmissibility of a disease in the broader context of a video where you're misrepresenting information and lying.
Zucker said it is not entirely certain that monkeypox will be classified as a new STD because, although it is less common, it can be transmitted via skin-to-skin contact in non-sexual situations.
Yeah, which HIV can't, unless you've got blood involved in some capacity, which is not very common, ideally.
Okay, well, again, that may be true, but the main vector of transmission...
Yeah, the logic of that might be true, but my feelings on the issue, Ben Shapiro, are going to differ from that logic, and in that way, you know, I'm gonna have to keep calling it a gay disease. Fuck it.
And is, in fact, homosexual sex. According to Dr. Zucker, for those engaging in sex...
And it doesn't just have to be homosexual sex. You know, there are cis women out there who engage in anal sex. You know that, right? Like, it's not just gay men. Now, it might be the case that these gay men are more, like, open and having more sex. So obviously you should be careful. But, like, you can have anal sex regardless of your biological sex or gender identity. You could do that. Why say homosexual, not anal sex? I'm not entirely sure on that, to be honest. The reason why Ben Shapiro would say that is because he essentially thinks of being any kind of queer as a disease, and having an actual disease that seems to be affecting the demographic of gay men more than others is very convenient for his ultimate goal of wanting to eradicate queer people from broader society. Also, not all gay men like anal sex. That is true, but anytime a conservative sees two adult men walking down the street holding hands, they immediately imagine them having sex with each other, like rough anal sex. That's the first thing in the mind of somebody like Ben Shapiro or conservative when they see that. Just two men holding hands in public, the first thing they think of is them having sex because they can't understand romance through any other lens. Because the ultimate goal for a conservative of romance is to have sex with usually a woman, if you're a man, in order to have a child. That's it. You know, missionary for the purpose of procreation, which is why, the whole WAP fiasco was a thing.
Sexual intercourse, it's best to do so in places where visibility is good rather than in dark places. I know that we're not allowed to talk also about the fact that you should probably know your partner, but kind of you should probably know your partner.
Yeah, you should probably know, you should have an understanding of your partner's sexual history as it pertains to their STD tests, their STI tests, obviously. Yeah, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. The fact that people might be irresponsible in that way, you know, people are irresponsible sometimes. I would advocate that people aren't, but like, there's only so much you could do. Also, if there was less of a stigma about getting STI tests, there was less of a stigma around being, you know, any kind of queer sexually, people might be more willing to be more careful about it and not have to be so secretive. Maybe. I don't know. That might be a crazy idea, though.
We also know the use of a condom lowers the risk of infection, especially of rectal infections, which are very painful. Sounds terrible. People need to be aware of this virus and go and get checked if they have any kind of skin lesion. He said, right now, the cases are mainly found among men that have sex with other men. It's a disease that can easily be passed on to other populations. I mean, not that easily, because the research...
So we're just going to disagree? He says it's going to be easily... Like, maybe he'd forgot he wasn't supposed to read that part, where it says that it can be easily... Even though it's primarily, it seems to be affecting the demographic of gay men, it could easily spread to other populations. Well, not that easily, actually, because, you know, my feelings suggest that that's not actually true.
From the New England Journal of Medicine is showing that an overwhelming 95% of confirmed cases were likely transmitted via close sexual contact, unless there are other doctors who are very afraid that this is going to stigmatize the LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign ampersand star.
Oh my
sign.
God. Let's go. I thought comedy was dead. Thank fuck, dude. I was in need of a laugh. I am hooting and hollering right now. This is probably the funniest joke I've ever heard today. And, you know, we were playing multiverses earlier. I was absolutely demolishing people, playing a bunch of friends and whatnot. We were cracking jokes. We were having fun. We were being humorous, a bit problematic. It is what it is. But this is actually incredibly funnier. Wow. God damn.
Community. Dr. Itzhak Levy, director of the HIV/AIDS Center and supervisor in the infectious disease unit at Sheba Medical Center, said, I'm not sure.
Sheba? That's a dog. Sorry.
And supervisor in the infectious disease unit at Sheba Medical Center said, I'm not sure if it's a sexually transmitted disease or a disease that is transmitted during sexual activity, which are two entirely different things. If it's the former...
Yes, they are. I hope Ben understands that. Unfortunately, if Ben was to understand that and ideally demonstrate his understanding of the fact that those two things are different, it kind of blows a hole in the entire 8 minutes of video we've watched so far.
That means it's transmitted when there's penetration and things like that. If it's something that is transmitted during sexual activity, that means it's being spread during skin-to-skin contact. Okay, but it has to be apparently pretty heavy skin-to-skin contact because, you know, you just shaking hands with somebody is not going to give you monkeypox.
Unfortunately, it still could if they've got an open lesion on their skin, apparently. So says the CDC.
Over at the Washington Post. He says, quote, countless public health experts have uttered statements like this one, anyone can get monkeypox, in the past 2 months. Members of the media and politicians have parroted the message ad nauseum without stopping to dissect what it implies or obscures. This broad strokes maxim that everyone on Earth is susceptible to this troubling infection might be factual on its surface. It is so egregiously misleading it amounts to misinformation. But this, by the way, is typical of the health community.
An abundance of caution. So, like, let's agree with this hypothetical that, oh, maybe it is like it's not as big of a deal and it's, not everybody can get it or whatever the fuck. Who does it hurt if we are more careful about it? Who is it hurting? If people are more careful about not spreading a disease or contracting it, who's getting hurt? In fact, if people aren't more careful about it, then the people who are getting hurt are the people getting it, right? I don't know why an abundance of caution after the world has been rocked by 6.4 million deaths from COVID, which are still increasing, and the United States, 1 million deaths and increasing from COVID. I feel like an abundance of caution about another potential pandemic might be warranted. Maybe. I don't know. The conservative mantra is not learning from your mistakes, it's never acknowledging them, right? Like, it's not that we should learn from the mistakes of the past. We should simply, as conservatives, rewrite history to make it so that those mistakes never happened. So that, when we inevitably make the same mistakes again, well, we could just rewrite history again. Because reality, objective facts, logic, all of that shit need not apply if you're a conservative. If you're a Republican, you just, you can just close your eyes and ears and pretend you don't see or hear it. Fuck it. Why not?
What we have seen...
it's much nicer on the brain that way. It makes us, you don't have to think as much.
In the past several years is that the health community is willing to lie to you. They love the platonic lie. It is their favorite. It is where they get to tell you.
Wait, so what are the other lies other than the ones that he posited were quote unquote lies that haven't been?
You are at tremendous risk of dying from X, Y, or Z, and thus you must do exactly what they say. If you don't shut down the schools, your kid is going to die of COVID, even though the number of kids who died of COVID is exorbitantly low.
But you still have to wonder how many kids transmitted COVID to their parents or grandparents who ended up dying. 1 million of them who have died in the United States and 6.4 million around the world. Don't look into that, of course.
Everybody is at risk of dying of COVID-19. Even if you're a young, healthy 20-year-old, you must get 20 times vaxxed because, after all, you could die.
But who is saying that? It's true that if you have a comorbidity, you might be more likely to die. Like if you have asthma, if you got COVID and weren't vaccinated or boosted. And even still, if you could suffer tremendously. But if you don't die, you're still suffering, right? There are people who have long COVID. There are people who it impacts harder, even if they don't die. You probably still shouldn't be okay with people getting it. How many kids dying is acceptable to you, Ben? Well, that's an easy question. It seems like. There might be an objective answer to that. Because of his poo-pooing of COVID-19. It kind of gives you the answer. Maybe more, even. You'd have to round up. You have to make some projections.
And I mean, technically, you could die of COVID. The chances are just extremely, extremely low. But what they do is they tell this platonic lie so as to get everybody to take the vaccine, supposedly to end infection, which it didn't end up doing. I hope you...
So wait, we get a little bit of peripheral vaccine trutherism at the end, which is pretty PogChamp from the Facts and Logic guy. So one of the main reasons why we weren't able to eradicate COVID by everybody getting a vaccine is because dumbasses like you and people that watch you and other people in your circles were telling people not to get the vaccine. There are a variety of people that weren't taking it seriously, that weren't wearing masks, that weren't not gathering in massive quantities of people and just, spreading the disease. There have been countries around the world who have fared infinitely better than the United States has, and they didn't have to grapple with such issues. So if we actually did take it as seriously as we should have, we could have made it not as bad. But now, the main reason why the COVID pandemic is still a major thing we have to worry about, multiple variants cropping out of the original one, because of you, Ben Shapiro, and people like you, the Republican Party of which you support. That's why. If you didn't want that to be the case, then you wouldn't be you. You wouldn't be a Republican, you wouldn't be a conservative, but they don't care. Because the actual logic, the actual facts, the actual reality that you can see with your eyes and ears are not relevant to the discussion at hand if you're a conservative. Because it might hurt your feelings that you didn't do everything you could have to save the life of Grandma, of Meemaw and Pop Pop. They're just casualties in the war, Gotta break a few eggs and make an omelet, I guess. That's sad, man. Well, I guess to summarize, you should probably be careful, right? If you can get vaccinated, you should probably look into that. You should probably look into your vaccine history to see if you've got any vaccine that might still be effective against it. You have to talk to your doctor, talk to medical professionals. You should probably be trying to avoid a variety of the ways that the disease can be spread, or at least mitigate the potential for it to spread in your own personal life, just out of an abundance of caution, you know? Pretty, I think, fair, in my opinion. If you don't delight in the suffering of human beings, might be something to look into. Like, what I've just said is not politically correct, apparently. What I've just said is a faux pas for Ben Shapiro and people like him. This video is CONURE CALLOUT after literal years is a person who's not won these a single time, even after being eligible for so many of them. Friend of the show and fellow streamer, Mr. Beer Bash Johnson, thanks so much for the support, for being a consistent member of the community, and I'm finally glad that you made it to finally pass the finish line. It's a joke because he does racing content and also politics. If you would like to be the CONURE CALLOUT as well, you can follow me on Twitter at CONURECC, retweet my video links when they go live, remember to subscribe to the channel, put all notifications on, we'd hit the bell, I'd appreciate that as well. Leave a like if you like. Comment something about how Ben Shapiro is a stinky poopy butthole baby boy bitch boy, and carry on.